After my students have finished our ESL program, most of them are planning to take English composition with American students. Needless to say, many of them feel some stress about this because they imagine that their future American classmates will be much better writers than they are. So to build up their confidence, I tell them that they actually will have a huge advantage over their American classmates. And I'm not just making something up. They really will. I tell them that there's a great writing technique that they can use in English Comp that will make their essays uniquely interesting. Here's how I introduce it. All of you have a big advantage over American students. Almost anything that you can include in your essays about your culture or country will be interesting for your American instructor. So for example, let's say an American student writes in his essay, "Every morning I eat cornflakes for breakfast." His English comp instructor will think, boring, many Americans eat cornflakes. But on the other hand, if an ESL student from China writes in her essay, "Every morning I eat cornflakes for breakfast," her English comp instructor will probably think, "Wow, that's interesting. They eat cornflakes for breakfast in China too?" I have found that this idea can be very liberating to ESL students. When they are trying to think of ways to support their ideas in an essay, they can consider using this technique or tool. The examples from their cultures don't have to be deep or profound. Almost anything, even the most mundane, will probably be interesting to Americans, even eating cornflakes. On the other hand, the American students can feel pressure trying to come up with examples that will not sound obvious to the instructor. However, just encouraging them to include this kind of information in their essays often results in simplistic paragraphs, like this one from an essay that an international student wrote about raising children. In addition to teaching skills, parents sometimes need to discipline a child who misbehaves. Some people will spank their children in order to get their attention and redirect them. However, in my country, parents very rarely do this. The writer did include information from his country, but he missed an opportunity to exploit this information and make it more remarkable. After I read this paragraph, I wondered, how do parents in his country discipline their children? American students would probably say that parents, to discipline them, won't let them watch TV or play video games. So I asked the student to revise the paragraph with more details about what parents do. And then he revised his. And this is his revision. So the first part's the same. And he had written, "However, in my country, parents very rarely do this." And then here's the details that he adds. "Instead, if a child refuses to listen to his mother or throws a tantrum, his mother will tell him to stand outside the house. The worst thing that can happen to someone in my culture is to be excluded from the group. So this type of punishment can be very effective." When I read that, I thought, wow, that's amazing. I never heard that before. So our challenge as ESL and writing instructors is to help students see that the details about their country or culture are what will be most stimulating to readers. By using an inductive approach, we can effectively lead them to this awareness. This means that instead of just showing them some samples and expecting them to internalize the technique, we have them interact with samples. Through that process, they will formulate their own understanding of it. So, for example, we can juxtapose two sample paragraphs and ask students to identify the one which includes details about the country. By the way, The link below, in the link below, you'll find exercises to these that are similar to these ones that I'm going to show you, which you can download for free and use with your students. So here is exercise 1, which, as I mentioned before, uses an inductive approach. So exercise 1, here's the directions. Write good next to the 2 paragraphs that explain the details about information from the country. So topic 1, the causes and solutions to the problem of divorce. So we have 2 paragraphs about this topic, and one of them is good, and the other one of them is good, has a lot of details about the culture, and the other one doesn't. Okay, and students, of course, do this individually. Here's paragraph 1, sample 1. It's true that some newlyweds will cling to their desire to be independent. In my country, families try to help the couple realize that they can improve their lives by working together, for example, by sharing household duties or helping each other take care of their children. Okay, then sample 2, paragraph 2. It's true that some newlyweds will cling to their desire to be independent. In my country, we have a custom which is practiced in order to help couples realize how they can improve their lives by working together. On the night before the wedding, the bride, groom, and their friends and family members get together and break dishes. After this, the bride and groom have to clean up the mess. We have this custom in order to show couples how they will work together to overcome difficulties. So obviously, after students read this, they see, oh, number 2, that has details. Number 1 has something about the culture, but there's no details that make it interesting. But number 2 is pretty amazing with some really good details. So this is a sample, and once they've read this, they get the idea. Now I see what kind of details are going to improve my samples in my paper. So let's give them another juxtaposed paragraphs, and this topic is sarcasm. So they're going to juxtapose number 3 and number 4 and choose the best one. Number 3, sarcasm does not necessarily lead to tension between people. It can be funny and a way to release frustration. For example, when the Korean former president was unable to stop the housing prices in Seoul from rising, some people said, "I'm so happy that I'll be able to pay for my home before I die because of our wise president." Those people weren't seriously happy, but instead were mocking the president. And then number 4, sarcasm does not necessarily lead to tension between people. It can be funny and a way to release frustrations. For example, in Korea, if something bad happens to us, we might say, "Great, that's just what I needed." So again, I think it's very clear that number 3 has the interesting details. And again, that's the model for what we want students to be writing. So then the next step, the next exercise, we want to help students better internalize this technique. So we assign exercise 2, in which they apply it in a writing task. So in exercise 2, we say choose 2 topics from the list below and write a paragraph for both topics. Include information from your culture or country as a detail. So just to let you know, give you an idea of what the kind of topics are, we have number 1, a smartphone can be extremely useful. So if they can come up with something that they might be able to include about their culture, and again, it can be almost anything, they could write a little paragraph and include details. Number 2 is that they can customize this one a little bit. Blank is an invention that has had an important effect on people's lives. So each student can come up with an invention that they'd like to use, and then write a paragraph, again, using some examples from their culture to support their idea. And then there's some more, 6 more here. And they're going to be just choosing 2 of those and writing paragraphs. I'll give you just a couple of seconds. I'm not going to read through each of these. If you want to just kind of glance at them. So needless to say, this technique will not be conducive to every topic that students write. However, if they are aware of this tool, they'll be able to draw upon it in order to not only clarify their ideas, but also engage and even entertain their readers. As I mentioned, if you would like to try out this technique with your students, you can download 2 exercises which use the inductive approach in the link below. Oh, by the way, do you remember those 2 examples that I showed you a couple of minutes ago about a couple breaking dishes and about the sarcastic remark that Koreans said about their leader? I didn't just make those up or find them in a source. They were actually written by a couple of my students in their essays after they had practiced this technique. Pretty impressive, eh?